All right, everybody, welcome back to Tuesday Talks. We are live. We got some exciting people joining us, and we have our guest of the day, Pavan, who is joining us.
Hey, what's going on?
He is the founder of Mouth Media Network and a lot more, a master connector, community builder, strategist, and we're really excited to have him on the show today. So hi, Pavan.
Cool. What's going on, Mel? How you doing?
What's going on? I like the artwork behind you today.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, we picked it up from our honeymoon a few years ago in Vietnam.
Nice, nice. Well, like I said, we are excited to have you. I know that you are working on some exciting things, so I want to hear a little bit about that, and I want to just, the audience today, for those that are joining us, we are going to be chatting about how you can build authentic community around your brand. And that's why I'm so excited to have Pavan here to talk about it, because he is a master at that. We're going to talk a little bit about how he's done that through podcasting and the amazing network he's built, and just by building genuine connections over the years and how to cultivate them and what that can do for your brand. So Pavan, why don't you start with telling us, you're all over socials. What are your favorite channels to connect with people on?
Well, yeah, I guess full disclaimer, I am all over social. I don't have a huge personal following on it, but I'd like to say that it's the intended audience that are following me. So in some regards, it's very successful, but when you look on it, you may not be overwhelmed by, the 200,000 followers or somehow that I don't have. But with that said, I like Instagram. I mean, right now it's Instagram. Yesteryears was Meetup as well as Facebook.
Yeah, Instagram is tricky, but I think you bring up a good point, right? I think everybody worries about the number of followers, but it's about having quality followers, engaged followers, and really what you do with that network. So saying you love Instagram, what are some of your favorite brands on Instagram that you think do a great job building community?
I guess building community through Instagram. I mean, you're kind of killing it. So I won't lie. Like this whole Tuesday Talks thing, when you first started it several months back, I guess it was probably mid last year. Man, from the first second I saw it, I thought it was pretty brilliant. So I think this is a very, very unique way of cultivating community for sure. I mean, I'm getting pings on my bottom left right now of how many people are kind of waving and joining in. So really, really cool stuff. So I would actually like, not to kind of like be like self-promoting here, but I think it would be for you. I think you do a great job of it. And I'm not just saying that, but beyond that, I mean, maybe, I really like how companies like Hypebeast and a lot of the players in the streetwear side of things engage in community. One of my favorite, and full disclaimer, it is a client of mine, but I love how Sneaker Tracker does it. So their Sneaker TRKR, really, really unique way of kind of giving a full open lens of what the company is up to, how they're doing it, and also promoting other people in the community that they'd like to engage with, and just kind of sharing value. One of my good friends of the Geppert group, it's a pretty young consulting group, but I just love the way that he uses polling. So anytime that brands are effectively using polling, I really appreciate it. Yeah, I guess that's to name a few.
Well, I think you bring up a lot of key points. Content is so important. I think when you bring up Hypebeast and a lot of those brands in the streetwear category, they just have such great content, and I think that gets the community excited, but also polling, because people, your followers like to know that they have an opinion, they have a voice, you care about what they have to say. You're going to create products and services that cater to those needs and wants. And so when you have an active conversation with your community, it helps foster it in a very authentic way.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me flip it for a second. Like IGTV, I haven't really been paying much attention to IGTV except for when you go live on this Tuesday Talks. What do you think is like? Do you think that that's going to take off? Because you as a brand, you're full on making this a content series, and I think that that's the only way I've seen it be effective. But otherwise, like I mean, have you seen any other brands that are really using IGTV pretty well? And do you think it's going to stick and like start gaining that attraction?
I think that it just takes I think it just takes a lot of effort in creating a plan for the content. That's the hard part. I mean, I've definitely seen brands, and I think a lot in like the beauty industry because it's so visual, and they'll do makeup tutorials or beauty regimens, and in that sense, it's really visual. So I think for the beauty industry, it works really well. But it takes like a content manager really still. And I think people underestimate that. You know, it's not just I'm going to go on live. It's really taking the time to think through, okay, what's my point of view going to be? What's that content strategy going to look like? You know, even for us to do Tuesday Talks, it takes a bit of a team. You know, we're making a social tile. Somebody else from my team's editing it. I'm reaching out to you to be my guest. What kind of topics do our audience care about? And so I think that's the trick. And I think it's not as like, you know, it's not as easy as Insta stories. IGTV takes a little bit more of an effort. And I think that's a little bit more heavy lifting for a lot of, at least, you know, smaller emerging brands that don't have a full team to help them with that.
Sure. Makes sense.
So tell me then, why has building communities been so important to you, and why do you think that's an important focus that brands should take as an authentic marketing tool?
Well, look, I think community, so I think a lot of people confuse community and audience. So, and that's kind of, to take it to social media, that's the difference between having followers and engagement, right? So for me, I think the power of community, you can transfer it in anything that you do. An audience, not necessarily are they going to be sticky. So for Mouth Media Network specifically, you know, we have podcasts, we create podcast content essentially, but community has always been an integral foundational piece of what we do. So every podcast has a community element to it. We bring people together, we interact with them, we have events and shared stories and support for each other. And the reason is because if we do want to start something else or tangential to the business, we have support. So Mel, like you and I have met each other. You were my first speaker at the first meetup I ever had, right, in 2008. Right. So it's like, and this is the power of it, right? Like, so now over the last 10 or 11 years, going on 11 years, which is crazy to reflect on, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have folks like yourself and then just a tribe of people that we continue to collaborate with and work on. And, you know, at the time I was working on open source fashion, which was just a meetup group.
And you had sandals. I got a sandals line.
Yeah, it was out of the intent, the original intent was to build community around a brand I wanted to launch in the fashion space, specifically sandals, right? And now I have a media company that is foundationally strong because of the support of the folks that were there from the beginning, that were at those meetups, right? That were at the, whatever that space was now, the Wix space.
The Wix studio space.
Yeah, when it was like the free space over there, I was pouring wine. My friends from high school and college were there to like help support and check in people. And that's just what it is, right? I've always been an advocate of bringing people together and supporting people unconditionally. So, that happens to turn around as well, and I've experienced that directly.
So it's interesting. It's true because you don't know where the road's going to take you in that trajectory. Speaking of Mouth Media, though, even within that, you've built quite the community. You started with one show. How many shows does Mouth Media Network have now under its umbrella?
Yeah, so we have 18 shows that are public facing, and then some of the work that you guys don't see is that we do kind of podcasting as a service or white label podcasting services for larger companies.
And why do you think podcasts have become such a trend, and how is that helpful for brands?
Yeah, interesting. So, you know, I think that there's several variables or aspects that lend to kind of it taking off. But, you know, I think the storytelling in a podcast is super intimate. But beyond that, it's a secondary consumption. So in the sense that, like, right now, if people are listening to us, their attention has to be on us. They're not generally working unless they're just listening to the audio or doing other things. They're not cooking, they're not riding their bike, they're listening to us. And in some aspects that's really strong, but in other aspects podcasts really prevail in the sense that you can still focus and continue with your day-to-day. And so as time becomes a little bit more valued, or I guess it's always has been valued, just in this case you're kind of reclaiming some of your time back by consuming the same book on audio version, or if you're listening to interviews on How I Built This or on Mouth Media versus watching a YouTube video of the same interview.
So it's interesting you bring up How I Built This, because I think that's like a staple when somebody thinks of podcasts. Everybody knows of that. And so many brands get awareness because they've been a guest on that, just on yours. So how did you pick the content that you focused on within your network?
So we kind of fell upon this a little bit, right? So I guess the initial catalyst to us being in this space of podcasting was through Open Source Fashion at the time when we were a consulting firm. So between the time I met you in 2008, you know the journey. We were a meetup group, we were conferences, we were kind of curated dinners and just kind of bringing people together. And then we were a consulting group where we were helping brands navigate this influx of technology, specifically around the retail environment. And in that journey, we were encouraged to start a podcast. I didn't really know much about it, but I knew it was content for our blog at the time, right? So we were using it as a foundational content piece, also an opportunity to leverage up our network, grab people's attention that we wouldn't necessarily have the ability of being in the room with, because now we're offering them an opportunity to create content for them. So, or with them, I should say. So we started one podcast called Fashion is Your Business, and that was really just an extension of our content strategy for open source fashion. That took off unintentionally just by being consistent and putting the right content out there for the right audience. And there came a time where we decided as a group to pivot from consulting in the retail space to go into podcasting full on, because we just felt the tremors and the interest in the environment. So that's how it happened. And now from there, understanding that B2B and relationship management within industries has been our strength, we decided to go on that same kind of tangent. And so we built shows around the beauty industry by finding folks in our network that were voice leaders in that space. So startup founders, investors, media, the folks that run media publications and brands. And then we did the same for travel and real estate and music and so on and so forth. So, I mean, for us, it's really just finding the right people and the right voices, and then developing the framework around that.
And okay. And so how, in your opinion, successfully build connections with your listeners? Like, what are some of the strategies?
So events is huge, right? We record our shows in front of live audiences that are invite only multiple times a month. So if you go on mouthmedianetwork.com, you could see a little place to kind of put in your profile information and request access to these events. They're mostly in New York, but we do travel, especially when there's conferences. So we'll be at Shop Talk in Vegas this week, starting on Sunday through, I guess, Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever that is. And then we're going to be over at South by Southwest as well, participating in a few programs there and recording. So the events is a large part of that. We make sure to respond to everyone we possibly can in terms of, when we're getting pitched stories or we're getting pitched to be in environments. But overall, it's really just a mutual support between the community and us. So a good example of that could be like a newsletter that I send out personally. I not only, and this has been something I've been doing for 10 years plus through Open Source Fashion, Mouth Media, and now with my personal newsletter, is supporting the people that are in my environment. So if you, for instance, have content that you wanted to platform, and I also value, I think it's invaluable for my audience, I'll put it on the newsletter. If you have an event, likewise, it doesn't have to be my event. I'm putting it on the newsletter, some articles that I read, and just kind of value that I know that my audience is interested in. It doesn't have to be part of what I'm directly incentivized or monetized or able to monetize. It's just pure support and help for other people that, again, my community will find value in. So I need to drive that information to them, regardless of whether it's competitive or not. And I say that in quotes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for sure. Today, everybody talks about collaboration, right? Collaboration is so important. I think supporting each other is so important,
Melissa, when's the first time you heard that word? What is the first time you heard that word being driven in your face? Nonstop.
Collaboration. That's part of your logo, I think.
Yo, it was part of my logo. Open source for the Freestyle Fashion Conference. We had collab on every t-shirt. It had nothing to do with my brand, but like everything about just being a part of each other's universes.
Yes, and,
it
and
is.
if it
It is
makes
talked about a lot.
sense for your community and adds to your key, then I think that, you know, it'll go right. And so when you say that, like, what are some, and we have a question that came in from Lauren that we'll get to, but before we get back to building community, I do have a collaboration question for you. What are some collaborations you're really excited about right now when it comes to, you know, kind of the retail or fashion world?
I enjoy the experiential aspect. So I'm enjoying when like a company is putting in interesting coffee shops. And I went to the Todd Schneider store a few weeks ago alongside Madison Square Park. And I'll tell you that the way that he's approaching his brand and collaboration is truly in the DNA of what he's doing as a designer. So he has his own standalone brand, of course. He's also most famously now known for successfully collaborating with Champion and reinventing what that brand identity is. So you could go to Todd Schneider, pick up Champion gear for $150 a sweatshirt, or you could go to Modell's and pick it up for $20. But it's interesting how he's been able to balance that. But he does the same with watches, there's there's a salon in his store, there's a coffee shop in his store, there's an atelier in the back. There are tangential brands to his overall culture that he collaborates very, very well with. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think that with what he's done is just tremendous in every aspect, and it's very current.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that store too. It's not that far from our office, and I think there's cool stuff happening here around Madison Square Park. So I agree with you on the Todd Schneider store. If you haven't been, I recommend visiting. We have a question here. So what are the most popular ways, aside from pop-ups, that you've seen brands implement to encourage growth of their community?
On social or in general?
In general, like community around the brand. So you mentioned, you mentioned pop-ups, you mentioned events, but.
Well, I'll keep it to pop-ups for a second. So I think what Glossier did during the summer with I think they did like something like a Summer Friday showroom thing where they opened up, they created a showroom environment out of their offices. You can go in and experience the brand. So the idea wasn't to sell product, as it rarely is anymore. That's, of course, a byproduct of the brand experience. But I just love the way that they opened up their doors in their world to gain feedback, to understand their customer, engage with them directly, and create a community around it with events. I'll give a shout out to the company my wife is with, which is WP Designs. They launched, or Assembly Brands, I should mention. So they launched a pet brand called Wild One Pets, and their pop-up in Soho towards the fall going into the winter of last year, into unique in the sense that they really built a pet owner community, right?
I remember seeing photos of you at the Wild Ones. I didn't realize that was your wife. So the brands did that. I didn't even realize she was there. Look at all this I'm learning on this live chat.
Yeah. So they actually, we should send stuff over to Mila, but we basically,
our office needs some Wild Ones here for sure.
So so they did, Wednesday, they did like happy hour for your dogs and the owners, right? They did a series with So Far Sounds in there to gain, people that are interested in live music experiences. They just did a beautiful job of just encouraging that community to come and support them as pet owners. So I thought that they did a great job. And if you go onto social again, if you go to Sneaker Tracker, TRKR, and I'm not just saying this because they're a client of mine, I have nothing to do with their social strategy, but what they're doing is they're pre-launch right now, and they've gained 16,000 followers organically just by promoting other people and the culture around what they're all about in a beautifully designed way. But what they also do is they're also giving they're pre-launch right now. They're a tech platform, but they're pre-launch. And right now they're signing up people through beta by giving them clips on Insta stories about like screenshots of their actual product and bringing their community in. They have an engagement rate of like 20, 30, 40% on those 16,000 people. They're hyper engaged. So I think
that's really high. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that if you could launch a brand with a tribe around you already, forget it. They've been already like sponsoring and supporting brands without even a product in the market for the last year. You know, they've been building community.
So that's Sneaker Track, you said?
Sneaker Tracker.
Sneaker
So
Tracker.
it's Sneaker
Okay.
yeah, TRKR. Yeah.
Very cool. So I think those are great examples, and I think with the examples you bring with Glossier and with Wild Ones, and you know, it's really about creating programming that's relevant to the end user that you connect with, right? So, and it's providing value to them.
But let's not forget what Refinery 29 has done with 29 Rooms over the last several years, right? I mean, when they first came out on the scene with 29 Rooms, that exploded their brand, right? And this is probably going back 6 years ago now, I would assume. Like, don't quote me on that, but they've been doing it for 6, 7 years. Not a lot of people know that, but I mean, now it's evolved into something else. But I mean, it does connect to their reader and their end consumer. So it started off as industry insider and influencer and media and all this stuff, but it really has trickled down into them being the powerhouse that they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had a perfect storm of a lot of trends coming together, creating Insta-worthy events, but also bringing in the past one, you know, some of it was a little socially, politically charged and commentary and allowing you to have a voice in that. And that's another interesting, you know, you've seen more brands being vocal in that aspect. But what do you think are, I'm reading a question we got, ways that you can track how you're growing your community? And you talk about the difference between followers and engagement and, you know, knowing, you know, if it's a valuable audience. So what is the ability that exists out there to really track and mobilize your community out there? You know, are hashtags still really important? What do you think?
So yeah, physical and digital community works completely different. You know, in terms of tracking engagement of my overall like Instagram following, a good place to start is maybe something like the Gram List, or maybe looking at DeMarie Group, like these analytics and platforms that could give you a dashboard of who is in your audience space essentially and how they're interacting with you. I think that that's pretty good. There's a company, if you're a larger company and you know you're a product brand specifically or a tech brand, you can look at a company called Narrative. I think Narrative is really interesting. It'll basically gauge what your social narrative is on different sites and platforms. So I think that that's a good place to start. I mean, your newsletter list is, first of all, email is still king in terms of engagement and being able to connect to your audience. So I mean, having a good email drip campaign and strategy to aggregate communities is usually a good indication. If people are signing up and sharing your newsletter, it's a good indication that your content's resonating and it's valuable and it's valued. So that's a good space. For me, in the in-person side, it's super manual on my side. So of course we have metrics that are associated with how many signups we have and how many people apply to come to our events, and you know, the social interactions that result from an event. But then also the manual side is just having spreadsheets right on the back end. It's still kind of the way that I work, and you know, I keep you know, a list of over 500-600 people that I prioritize in terms of a relationship. And I'll, you know, it's I forget what the hell the theorem is or the number exactly, but I think it's like 150, right? Where like you're traditionally, like, I guess we don't ultimately, we can't retain that many relationships and keep a hold of all of them organically. We just don't have the capacity. But I go and review that list every 3-4 months and see who I haven't followed up with in quite some time, and I'll just ping them just to ping them. You know, like, you don't need to, actually not don't need to, do not only communicate with people when you need something or to tell them something about yourself, right? So ultimately, if you make it a habit of just going through a list of people that you're prioritizing in terms of building a strong community with and together, then just go through that list and be like, hey, you know, I have this one article that may relate to 200 out of those 600 people and be like, hey, found this article, thought of you, hope you're doing well. Bam. You know, like it's the little things that matter. Like, you know, my friend Melissa, another Melissa, she without fail sends me a Christmas card and a birthday card every damn year. Now, I don't have that sort of patience to coordinate that effort. However, I do think it's really it's a nice thing, right? Like, just to understand that you're being thought of. And so this really does go back with the community engagement. I'm also receiving all these types of things, right? So it's more of like a pulse. It's more of a feeling. You could definitely feel whether you're getting that in-person real community stickiness by the support that you're receiving back from the community. But you can't give up on delivering value, even though it's oftentimes frustrating that you don't receive that same sort of attention from most people.
Sure. So I think the larger message there too is make sure that, remember that it's a give and take, try to be as authentic as possible. And I think whether you're doing it with the list of 150 people in the physical world, or if you have 100,000 followers online, you have to keep that same mentality, create authenticity. You know, if everybody remembers, make the list. I think that was a great idea. You know, remember people's, you know, give back to support them. Don't just expect them to support you. Really be as authentic as possible and understand what your audience cares about, and be supportive. And before we go, tell me the top 3 things you're excited about for Shop Talk 2019.
Are you to me, let's see, what are we going to do out there on Sunday evening? Probably going to organize a bit of a casual rendezvous amongst friends, so including yourself. I would assume that you'd be there.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we are going to be recording in terms of Mouth Media. We're going to be recording for the few days that are there. There's a bunch of different events, whether it's Shopify, The Lead. I think you're involved with Stacey Burns's event in the Retail Influencer Network. So I guess it's just really connecting with the folks that are thinking about brand and experience within the retail and fashion space, specifically fashion and beauty, or my interest over there.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a great conference. I'm definitely going to crash some of your events. And I look forward to seeing the content that you create through your podcast network. Pavan, what is the best way for people to follow you after this chat?
So Instagram's good. It's PVNBHL, which is probably in the corner over here. Otherwise, you could always email me directly, PB, which are my initials, at pavanball.com. I keep a bunch of different resources. So going back on community, if you go to the extra butter tab, you'll see like my favorite playlists, my favorite spots to plug in from, my favorite restaurants, cocktail bars. You'll get a glimpse of my culture essentially from the website. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll send over, well, I try to do it weekly, but it really hasn't been that. It's like every other week. I'll send out kind of like what I'm thinking about that week, and just some, as I mentioned, some value your way. So whether it's events that I'm prioritizing, articles that I'm reading. Actually, maybe I should go grab the book that I'm reading right now because it's really good for this conversation. You can check out this book, which I really like. It's called The Art of Gathering. By Priya
The
Parker.
Art of Gathering.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm reading it now. I'm like halfway through it. I just started it, but it's quite good. A lot of good points over there. Just you know, some of the takeaways is doing everything that you do with purpose and intent, whether it's a dinner gathering or, you know, something like this, like, you know, IGTV, or even you know, in person.